and welcome to another episode of the M42 Adventures podcast. I am your host, Rick Trimmer, and today we have a cool guest. It's actually pretty wild how we met. His name is Damien Plotts. He was a professional motocross dirt bike rider. He actually reached out to me on our chat on our website. So he sent me a message, said, I love the podcast, love what you're doing, would love to chat and have a conversation, and kind of told me what his background was. So I ended up calling him and we talked for about 90 minutes, our first phone call. He's just a good person, good dad, good husband. And he, has lived a very adventurous life, professional motocross rider, mountain bike rider, traveled all over the world, and just somebody that I thought would be good to come in here and give us some insight into a different experience and different adventure. So we're going to jump into this conversation. Stay tuned. Let's jump into this. Today we got Damien Plotts, retired professional motocross rider, right? I mean, kind of everything on two wheels you've done, it sounds like, from our brief conversations.
I've tried it all a little bit here and there, but my forte was definitely motocross. Started racing when I was 6 years old, really. My father bought me first bike when I was 6 years old. And I raced all the way till I was 32 years old professionally, and then have been dabbling since then. And interesting enough, now that I'm 50, I've got that itch again, because a lot of the retired motocrossers go back to a national championship, which ironically is happening this week. And the 50 plus class is stacked full of old competitors.
That's awesome, man. That's good. I think that's kind of natural and we'll jump in more into your story. And like I said, we had talked previously before this. But I know kind of in there in between was trying to survive, and I want to talk more about that, where you're kind of coming out of this chapter and going, and you'd said, what's next, how do I pay the bills and stuff like that. So kind of run me through, Damien, so you got into it at 6 years old. I know your dad was instrumental in that. You told me the story. Sounds like just an amazing father. Kind of run me through, those people out there listening who would like to get into motocross or, any kind of, I know you did mountain bike racing, all these types of things. What did you have a natural passion for that? I mean, at 6 years old, that's probably hard to determine, or was you kind of steered that way?
How it began for me was, we were probably a very poor family, I would consider. I mean, times have changed so much. My parents, when they got married, they were like 19 and 20 years old, and literally bought a mobile home, and they put it in a mobile home park. Now we're talking in the 70s. So this is a way different time than nowadays. And my dad's goal was to buy a piece of land, but he was a postal worker. So he wasn't, killing it when it came to money. It wasn't a big, my grandfather was a World War II vet, and he did own a restaurant and a bar. So, we probably had a little bit more money than maybe some of the average people around us in a very small town in Pennsylvania. But I just rode bicycles at a young age. I was like riding bicycles, and I remember hanging out with all these older kids all the time, and they were making jumps out of wood and stuff. See like these little memes of how it was in the 70s where kids jumping over each other. Well, that literally was me. And my dad rode dirt bikes, but he only raced a couple times, and he realized that it just kind of wasn't for him. He wasn't any good. He hurt himself immediately. He used to tell me funny stories about him trying to race when I was like 2 years old, But
Yeah.
he bought me a little 50 on my 6th birthday. And it was like a year and a half later, he was like, hey, we're going to line up at a race. And I never rode a track. I probably went and rode around. And I remember a funny story. You and I didn't talk about this the other day. For almost 2 years. Now, I can't tell you how many times I raced in that 2 years. I mean, it might have been 4 times. It might have been 10. I don't remember that. But I think I finished last place every race. And back then, a lot of times I didn't race against other kids on 50cc dirt bikes. I've raced against kids that were on 85s or 60s or something.
Right.
Well, then for some reason on my 8th birthday, we went to a race, and this one I do remember. It was at a track called Sleepy Hollow in Pennsylvania. And, we had been practicing at home because my dad bought some land and put the mobile home on a big basement. Like he built a big
Mm,
basement and put it on it.
mm,
That was because that's what he could afford and made it as nice as possible. But the thing is, we had land. So now all of a sudden we could go build a track, we could do whatever. And that was us. And I grew up there till I was, I think, 18 years old, but or 17. But we went to that race 2 years later and I whole shot of the race and won. And then it
mm.
was really ironic. We didn't travel. We just raced locally. There was probably maybe 5 tracks within 2 hours of our house. So we went to them every weekend. Well, it was weird. I didn't lose a race then for almost 2 years. So
Oh,
isn't it
wow.
strange? I went from completely like being last place to something clicked. And I always wished I knew what that was, but we never talked about it. Then I remember. And I don't know what it was.
Wow.
Yeah. So that was kind of my beginning. I had a father that knew a little bit about dirt bikes. He was definitely a father that was not afraid to, jump into things. He was like, "Hey, let's go
Mhm.
try this." Like he was very open-minded and he loved me and he wanted me to be successful and he wanted me to experience everything. And that's something that unfortunately I see a lot of fathers around nowadays that aren't doing that. And the video games are
100%.
there to, yeah, it's unfortunate. The video games are there to, keep the kids entertained and all this stuff. But don't get me wrong, the sport of motocross is growing substantially. And like, there is just thousands and thousands of people like that national championship, that amateur national champ. It's actually at Loretta Lynn's Dude Ranch. It's on
Mm.
her property.
Oh,
The
cool.
promoters like rented it ever since like I think the late 70s or early 80s, and it's been going strong every year. And there is
Mm.
thousands of people there right now this week. So that's exciting. And any given weekend, you can go to a local motocross track, and every state has them scattered all over. And it's funny, you'll go there and there'll be sometimes, let's say, 500 to 1,500 riders there, very passionate riders, got a lot invested in it. You could go down the street and talk to the guy at the mini mart, and he doesn't even know the track's there. So
Right.
I used to always say motocross is like the biggest small sport in the world. It's very strange how that is, So, there's a professional national up in Massachusetts called Southwick. Years ago, when the first time we went to Southwick, it's like in the middle of nowhere, Massachusetts. We're going down back roads trying to find this place. 2 o'clock in the morning. It's a national. There ends up being 30 some thousand people there, right? And
Yeah.
literally that what I just said about the mini mart was a true experience of ours. My dad pulled into this mini mart. Hey, this Southwick National. Guy didn't even know it was there. Here, we literally drove up the road like 6 minutes, and there it was, and there were 30,000 people there. And it's like, how in
Yeah.
the world did that happen?
Yeah. Yeah.
So, but
Well, and and
yeah,
and that's,
that was the
you know,
beginning. Mm,
and you made a statement there about, fathers, and that's where, when you told me your story, you actually reached out to me through our website, right, on our chat, and we got
mhm.
talking, and you just said, "I love what you're doing." And I says, "Let's chat, let's hook up." And we end up talking for what, 90 minutes, something like that. Our
I think
first
so.
ever phone
Great conversation.
call. Yeah, it was just and you told me, about your dad, and that's kind of the purpose of M42 Adventures, which we talked about, is trying to get people outside, whether it's motocross, mountain biking, surfing, hunting, fishing, golfing. I mean, we're just trying to do these experiences to get people outside so they do get off the screens, and it sounds like your dad understood that. And that, like you said, that is so needed. I hear all these stories about fathers who, I mean, that's not easy, to work a full-time job all week long and then load up. Are you an only child, Damien?
I was an only child. Yes.
So to load you up and, it's expensive, gas, time,
Mhm.
repairs, and to drive you around to all these races for, I mean, how long? How long did you guys do that together for before, I know this
Well,
is where it's going, where he finally couldn't, but how long was
right.
that?
Um, well, we did that till I was 17, 18 years old.
Mm, it's
So you
almost
think
over a
about it.
decade.
Actually, yes. Yeah. I mean, it started in probably 83, 84, and by 94, I was still traveling with my father. Mhm.
Mm,
And, now the life experience I had of traveling everywhere and just learning about travel and just learning, like I've listened to a lot of your podcasts, and I had to laugh some of your stories, like in Europe, trying to figure out where you're going to stay, sleep in the rent a car, whatever. I had those experiences. And I'll
mm,
tell you something, some of them sometimes are almost embarrassing to say because we did it on such a shoestring. Like,
absolutely.
just tell you a quick little funny story.
Yeah.
My dad never would go buy a vehicle, wouldn't, like nothing new. I mean, we
Mm,
drove everywhere we
that's
went
smart.
was like
That's
15-year-old vans or
yeah.
this pickup truck. I mean, literally, he made a deal with the U-Haul dealership. I remember in like 1989, and they gave us a trailer for $10 every weekend. And still to this day, guys up in Massachusetts, 6 hours away from us, would be like, they remembered us more for the dang U-Haul than they did from me winning races. It was really
Yeah.
funny
Yeah.
because motocross is, I don't know if it's a bad thing, but when you go now, like if you would go to this Loretta Lynn National that's happening, the money that people have invested is
Mm,
something that, like, if I raced right now, let's say I was, 6 years old now, we couldn't have done it. It would have been so
mm,
different. I mean, I don't get me wrong. I'm sure you can still show up in a pickup truck with, maybe a used bike and do well. But are you going to get to that level? I don't know. Things have changed so dramatically. So yeah, it was over a decade that we did that. And we just
I think that's in most sports. That's something that I'm learning. So as you know, I've been
mhm,
traveling the last 7.5 years. My two boys started traveling when they were 2 and 4.
that's
Um,
amazing.
yeah, and so they just barely this year finished their first 6 months of school ever in their life. We got home in
Okay.
December. We put them in school in January, and they got to finish half of a year in school for the first time ever. So I'm new to this world of sports and all these things with my children. And we
Mhm.
signed him, my oldest son, up. We signed him up for soccer and football instantly. And it's crazy, man. Just, you see
Yeah.
these kids out there in, $100 or $200 cleats. And, I mean,
Right.
it's like, I didn't do that. I didn't do that. I borrowed cleats from a buddy whose kid played. At 12 years old, I just don't feel like they need to go spend $1,000 to play flag football. It's just not how I do things. But man, you're right. I just watching these parents and the amount of money they dump into soccer and football and tennis. And then you go to the next level of, motocross where you have to have equipment, a machine. I can see how it would be very much harder to compete and a lot of people who don't have money to enter into this, which is sad.
It is sad, I mean, and I'll tell you something else, and this was another reason that brought me to you, was I had been thinking about the introduction to motocross, that it's very intimidating, obviously expensive, but it's not very open. Like, it's not a good open sport. Like, I go to these local tracks right near us, and we go over there, and it's like, okay, well, how do you get into this? And,
Mhm.
and that's something that you and I had talked about. And I look at it, I'm like, okay, there's a lot of money involved, but there's a beginner class at the local motocross track. And you go over there and it doesn't look like they're beginner. It doesn't look like a
Yeah.
guy that just literally maybe picked up a bike yesterday and is going to try this out. That part of it, if I could ever give back to the sport that gave me, practically more than half my life, that may be where the big push is for me, because
Mm,
everyone's always trying to find where's my niche and where
mhm,
can I bring value. That may be a place I can bring value. Now I've been coaching riders, as group training, private training, everything for many, many years. And don't get me wrong, that's a great way to give back. And you can make some money at it. You can grow it into a training facility, but are we really growing the sport at that moment? I
mhm,
question that because these are people already in it.
mm,
And when you go to a local town, like I'd mentioned earlier, and there's a national motocross track 4 minutes up the road and you don't even know it's there. To me, I'm thinking to myself, wow, there's a big opportunity to really grow this sport.
Mm.
And I'll tell you, I don't want to steer off to another direction, but something else is happening right now that may even make that multiply, a few fold. And that is introduction to electric motocross bikes.
Mm.
Because here's the evolution of motocross just in a very quick little nutshell. It was introduced here from the Europeans. I'm going to say probably in the 60s, and it wasn't even called motocross. They called it scrambling. It was basically a street bike with dirt tires, and they would try to bump up the suspension, take the lights off of it, and race it around a circle in dirt or whatever. Well, when it really started happening in the 70s in the United States, mentality was different then. Land ownership was different then. So guys could go buy dirt bikes and they could go ride at a quarry, anywhere. They could go maybe just find a field to ride or side of a mountain. Now everything's privately owned, and man, they'll be chasing you off with guns and everything. You don't just buy a dirt bike and go, I'm going
Liability.
to go ride.
Um, you know,
Liability, all of that.
yeah.
But what's interesting is, so people were riding dirt bikes in their backyards a lot. We're talking back in the 70s and 80s, 90s, it kind of stopped. Then what happened is, because of government and EPA and all that other, just government regulations in the
Yeah. BS.
late 90s. Yeah. I was going to say, in the
Yeah.
end of the
I know.
90s, early 2000s, the two-stroke dirt bikes went away because they thought they were, environmentally not sound or whatever, the
Yeah.
terms they use. So now
Yeah.
the whole world went to four-stroke. Well, now a guy that used to buy a dirt bike for $2,000 to $4,000, now it's $11,000. And a guy that could work on a two-stroke bike, now you got to work on a four-stroke bike with all this intricate stuff, and now computer thing, ignitions and everything. It's not so easy. But
Mm.
now Honda and all these other companies are starting to make electric bikes. And I keep thinking to myself, all these tracks were getting shut down because four strokes are so loud. I mean, they are loud, way louder than two strokes, and the sound travels. Well, if you get an electric bike and a guy lives in a indoor neighborhood with a half an acre backyard and he puts a little supercross track in, but now he has an electric bike, that may start happening. And that to me is almost, I'm not thrilled about the electric bikes. Don't get me wrong. I'm a little bit old school, but that part of it's exciting to me,
Yeah.
So
I was just up in camping this last weekend up in a place called Beaver Mountain here in Utah.
Mhm.
And we, we're sitting around the fire, hanging out one afternoon, and there's all these motorcycles and side by sides going around, and they're all loud. They're all loud. And which is fine, whatever. We're camping, it's a free world, so have fun. But I went for a walk with my dog over into the trees about 1,000 yards away from our camp, and I saw this flash through the trees, and I was like, what was that?" Just a flash. So I go walking over there a little more, and it comes by again, and I get up there, and it's a guy who had made like a little loop out there in the trees, a little, track.
Mhm.
Just not, obviously didn't create it, but just riding around, and he was on an electric bike,
Right.
and he's all geared up, and just doing this loop, and I couldn't hear it. And I was
Right.
like, I was sitting there, 50 yards from him, and he just "Zzz, zzz," and I was like, "Wow, that is weird. He can be over here in the woods right by our camp, and there's no sound." And I thought,
Yeah.
That's nice. That's nice because if
Right.
everybody had those up here camping, it would be be hearing the birds and the crickets. So I think you're right. That is, we actually talked about, hopefully next year. I know you had an academy, and we'll talk about that a little bit, where you had a motocross academy, but we talked about next year about maybe, partnering up and doing an M42 experience with some
Sure.
motorcycles or whatnot. And you had said that. You says, I've got land, I've got a track, you do. And you said, but I've got neighbors around. And so that, that could be a solution, to where you bring in
Right.
10 electric bikes, and now nobody, I mean, they're
They
silent.
don't even know what's happening.
Yeah. Are they racing
Yeah.
those? Is that in the professional world? Are they racing electric bikes at
Nothing
all?
really in the professional world, but there is, like there's one of the ex-pro Honda guys. He's been over in Japan because Honda's making theirs, and they got him racing, I think, just some races maybe in Japan, and they say
Mhm.
it's coming here. But we've seen nothing on the national scene,
Mm,
or
yeah.
professional scene. But
It'd be weird to go to
I'm
a big
sure it will.
arena and see, 30, 40 guys on the starting
Oh,
block and have them
be-
take off and it's silent. That would be kinda like
yes.
you said, I hate to say it, but the sound and the smell for me is nostalgic, it's what gets
Well,
your heart pumping.
it is. And that's where the two stroke world, I mean, you wouldn't believe it. In the motocross world, there's people that are they're so gung ho two strokes. That's all they want. Bring back crew
Mm,
stroke, get rid of four
mm,
strokes, which,
mhm.
at this point, we're 24 years into when it really started. It's not
Mhm.
going back. But
Yeah.
what's interesting is most of the manufacturers stopped making two strokes, but some still do.
Mm.
KTM, Yamaha, they still make a two stroke.
Oh,
Like my
interesting.
boys, they both ride 125 two strokes.
Mhm.
And I got to tell you, when they're riding around, I love to hear the sound and I love to smell it.
Me too. That's what so
I have a 450. Yeah. So,
yeah, I raced in a couple races. Again, it was one of those things where I rode with my buddies and had fun out in the hills and whatnot, and then, one of my other buddies started racing a little bit, and he says, "Hey, come up to this race here in Cedar," and I was like, "W you can just race?" Like you're saying, I didn't
right.
understand, I'm like, "Yeah, I can just show up and race," and he's like, "Yeah, dude, they don't care, it's beginner class." And
Mhm.
I showed up in it's funny, it's a really funny story, and I could even tell it here at the end maybe, but, I'm in jeans, ripped jeans, and, a wife beater. I had a little tank top on,
Oh my gosh.
Literally, and I had pads on. I had, elbow pads, and I had, um, knee pads and boots and everything. I had the gear, but I didn't have I again, like you said, I grew up very poor, and at
Mhm.
that time of my life, I was, like, 19 and extremely poor, and, we signed up, and I remember we came out of the gates, and I was so nervous, and I turned over to a guy next to me, and I says, "Hey, man, how do you start out?" And I remember him looking over at me like, "What?" And I says, what happens? The gate falls and I'm trying to
Right.
talk to him and he's like trying to get ready and, fixing his goggles. And I'm like, so does this go down? Does it fall forward or does it fall backwards? And he's just like, are you doing? And it drops and I take off and I was in the middle of the pack somewhere. I had more guts than skill at that point. And, we ended up going around a couple times and somebody went down and they're waving a flag and I didn't even know what the flag meant.
Oh,
I
right.
just see a guy
Mhm.
waving a flag and I didn't know what it meant. And so I went through the whoops just full speed and there was a guy down in the whoops and I ran right over the top of him, right over the
Oh, right. You
left
had no
side of his
idea what the
leg and
yellow flag was. Right. Mhm.
yeah, yeah, exactly.
Mhm.
And it's all on video. I have my girlfriend was filming it at the time and there was this
That's
big
awesome.
double at the very end and at the finish line and I never dared to quite do the double so I would come over and hit it and then I'd let off the gas and I would just case it and I'm 6'5".
Oh, yeah.
So, we would
You were
watch that
feeling
video
that.
back yeah, the whole crowd, it was funny because 'cause they'd be like, "Yeah, yeah, oh,"
Right, right. That's
and,
awesome.
but it was crazy, it was, exhilarating, but, um,
Right.
I remember going around a couple times and people were booing me because I was just, in jeans and a tank top, and after, like, 5 or 6 laps, they started cheering me because I was just taking all these chances and doing stupid stuff, but,
What they
yeah,
call
man, it was
sending
a
it.
yeah, 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 sending it like 80% of the way, but
Right.
yeah, it was very, it was a good experience. I did it, I think, twice and then realized I was gonna
Okay.
get hurt. And
Right.
you talked about that as well, where, I think people, push themselves too fast. And you actually mentioned that on street bikes, which I 100% agree with. I grew up
Oh,
with street
it
street
scares
bikes
me
my
all the
whole
time.
life,
Mhm.
and you see people, getting hurt and like I told you, every year we used to ride my chopper up to Yellowstone, thousands of miles with me and my wife, and I've never in 7 or 8 years have had a real close experience of getting hurt. I haven't. But I know to not ride in the right lane, where a car might inch out and you bump them. I know to, not ride on somebody's butt, on the highway where there might be a chunk of tire. Like that's the thing is I don't think people realize is they'll sell them to anybody. You can go down to
Right.
the dealership
Mhm.
and buy a, bullet bike
Sure.
and they hop on them and they're just not comfortable in turns. Um, and that's, I think that's where you come in and that's where I think we can do something together down the road whether it's street bikes or on dirt, because you have so much knowledge. And I actually liked hearing that from you because I'm not a professional. That's why I have you on here. But to hear, because I've just always told my wife, and my parents, I'm safer on this bike than most people. And they're
Right.
like, you can't be. That's impossible. You can't be.
Yeah.
It's not you,
Well,
it's
they
other
don't
drivers.
understand. Yeah.
And I'm like,
And
no,
it
there
is,
is
there is other drivers, but you can be more aware
absolutely.
than the general public is. You know what I mean? Just the
Absolutely.
simplest thing of looking way ahead instead of looking right down at
Exactly.
your front fender, which a lot of people
Yep.
will do. I see people drive that way, and yeah,
Or
it's
daydreaming. I had a buddy that was
daydreaming, right?
he got hit. He was driving along in the right lane, car inched out a couple feet past the stop sign, clipped his leg, and luckily he was okay. It didn't smash it. But I
Right.
says, "What happened, John? What happened?" And he says, "Honestly, I was thinking of what I was gonna buy at the grocery store and just was not thinking
Right,
about
right. Not in
riding
the
a."
moment.
Yeah. And so okay, let's go back. So you're traveled, so you're 6 to 8, you start racing, and then when did you actually go pro and start traveling the world and this become, more than
Yeah.
just a hobby for you?
Well, if you don't mind, I'll go through, kind of the nitpick of my pro career because it's a
Yeah, I
little
love
bit
it.
unusual also.
Yeah,
Um, I was trying to not go into every detail, but yeah.
right.
So,
Yeah.
when I was 17 years old, I won a national championship at that national amateur national championship at Loretta Lynn's I was talking about. And my father and we went there, I think the first year in 1986. Yeah, 86. I won it in 92. And I felt like looking back on the past, I felt like that was our whole goal. Every year, our goal was we're going to train, prepare, start, get the bike ready, everything we can to try to win this national in whatever class I was in. Well, that particular year, I was actually an expert. So that's like one level before you know, earn your professional license and then apply for it, do all this. So I won that national. And I think it was maybe a month afterwards, there was 3 pro nationals still left in the series. Well,
Mm,
we entered for 2 of the 3. I remember it because we were going to do all 3, but I forget why, but for some reason we didn't go the third one. And it was interesting. My very first pro race, the funniest thing in the world was, like I said, we didn't have money then. So we were really relying on sponsors. Well, we didn't have big engine sponsors or pipe sponsors, all this aftermarket stuff. So we were virtually almost riding a stock bike. I remember, funny story, my dad, we got a sponsor from like one of the pipe companies, but it was like 50% off and the pipes still cost like, I don't know, let's say it was $100. I can't remember now. Well, my
right.
dad said the dealership that sponsored us for our bikes was willing to give us pipes for like $60. So my dad's like, we're running stock pipes all year because they're $60, even if we go through
Yeah.
10 of them. So that was
Yeah.
funny. And you know what? But here's what's
Yeah.
bizarre is so I won that national on a stock bike, other than little things here and there, nothing much.
Mhm.
We went pro, showed up at that national, and we were so naive, I think back then, but it was funny. I always had an abundant amount of confidence. Like I did some interviews, later in life after I was done racing. And I had so many times people say to me, like, Damien, you know what I remember from you? You just had so much confidence walking around the track. You were on the starting line like you don't know, you could be sitting next to the GOAT, Ricky Carmichael, and you were like, I
Mhm.
got this guy. You know what I mean? That type
Mhm.
of thing.
Yeah.
And I think
Mhm.
mentality does go a long ways when it comes to competitive sports. And I always wanted to believe in myself and at least think that I was going to be the guy. You know what I'm saying? Even though maybe it
Absolutely.
didn't happen. Well,
Absolutely.
we got to that first pro race and we went there to win. And I have a good friend that tells the story. Unfortunately, he passed away actually 2 years ago,
Mhm.
but he was a really great family friend and he saw all this, went through it with us. And he used to always tell people about me going to that first national and how Damien and his dad, they went there in their, you know, 78 Dodge van against all these factory teams. And they thought they were going to win that day. And, it was interesting. We didn't know anything about pro racing. remember what I said, we focused everything on this Loretta lens. Well, when you turn pro, all of a sudden then you got better equipment, obviously more competition, but here's the big thing, endurance. Now I'm still only now 18 years old. I think I turned. I was in great shape, but I wasn't one to just go out and train all the time. I would go out and
Mm,
run here and there, but I rode my bicycle all the time. So I was in really good shape. And I rode my dirt bike doing motos all the time. We did that all the time, but I wasn't out doing CrossFit that time of my life, none of that stuff. And here's
mhm,
the bad part. We didn't know anything about nutrition. I
mm,
honestly, I didn't like drinking water, and my
mm,
dad never pushed it. I barely drink any water. I'd be drinking Gatorade, orange juice, you name it, just dumb stuff. We went to
mm,
that first national, and the way a pro national worked back then is you had to qualify to get into the main event. Okay. So you go through your qualifier. Well, the top 10 pro riders in the series don't have to qualify. Like in points, they just line up at the gate for the main. So you're qualifying for the 11th gate and on. So 30 more guys because there's 40 in the main event. Well, I got second place in my qualifier, and the guy that beat me, he was one of the big factory guys. And I'll tell you what, I almost beat him. We battled all the way to the finish. And my dad's like, see, we came here to win. And the only reason he wasn't in top 10 is I think he didn't race the beginning of the series because he was injured and he was coming
mm,
back.
mm.
Well, the first moto, I came out of the gate like sixth place. And I rode sixth place in that national with nobody like passing me or anything till almost 25 minutes into a 35-minute moto. And little disgusting. My dad, all he did is fed me, like I said, it was orange juice, Gatorade, you name it, or watermelon all day long.
Yeah.
I literally barfed it all up in my helmet, all over my gear, and like literally almost like heat stroked out, like a mountain biker, like bonking. I like did the
Mhm.
bonk. And now I did finish top 20 in that moto, and top 20 is how a pro rider earns a national number. I think I got 18th or 19th, but I mean, I like literally threw the anchor out. And the second
Mm,
moto, I couldn't even do it. Yeah.
mm.
And it was funny. We never raced another national that year because my body was like, it was affected by it for like a month or something. Well, we learned a big lesson then. So in 93, went into the pro series and I showed some greatness. I won a couple really big races, but in that 1 year is where I would say a lot of my dreams kind of, got hurt or vanished away. I broke my wrist in February racing the first Supercross in Tampa, Florida. And here was another dumb thing. We went to Tampa. We never trained on a Supercross, but I was racing all these guys, but it was more motocross outdoors, totally different sport. We didn't know that. My dad's like, you get in there and you show them who's boss, type of thing. And I broke my wrist. Then we went to a national later on in the year. I was coming back through, and I broke some ribs, punctured a lung. Then in November that year, that was the year where we had been talking to Suzuki all year, and they were willing to possibly do something with me in 94, but I had to make the first several races. That was like that letter of intent that you sign. And what you know it, I broke my dang kneecap in 9 pieces at the last week in November. And that was like so devastating because, here we are, we worked our whole lives for this,
Yeah.
and I was definitely able to compete and hold my own against some of the best riders in the world. And we're scraping pennies together to try to figure out how to go to the race next year. I'm 18 years old now. My dad's still paying for everything. All I'm doing is riding training during the week. I think I might have had a little part-time job. I worked at the local motocross or dirt bike shop at one time because we knew the people.
Mhm.
And when that went away, that was a hard time in my life because my dad came to me. And remember I told you this story. And he said, Damien, he says, you're going to be 19 next summer. And I'm like $47,000 in debt or whatever the exact number was. It was something like that. He's a postal worker, single dad. My mom and dad got divorced when I was 10. And he said, I can't afford to go any racing next year at all. I just need you to know where we stand. And he goes, I'm devastated too. I don't want this. I can see you're compete with the best one, but we need to figure a way to network or do whatever we need to do to get you on one of these teams. And because of the injury list, my first year of pro, it seemed like you're as good as your last race in a sense. So
Hmm.
everyone forgot about the Damien the year before where I was winning everything. So that was tough. So I raced in 94, but I just dabbled around with people that were helping me here and there. And I went through one of those moments, how you kind of reset yourself or reinvent yourself. And I was like, you know what? I went and got a self education. I was interested in self-help and business, and I wanted to learn it. I just went out and I worked, but I spent my money on sometimes going racing. Sometimes I would go to seminars, buy, whatever I was doing. And I was trying to grow as a individual because I really felt like, wow, if this dream's not going to happen, well, I'm not going to sit around twiddling my thumbs or go down to the local wood mill or whatever it was and get a job. That wasn't going to be me. So, and I did that for 3 years. And over that 3 years, I dabbled in a little business. That's what introduced me to kind of what I'm doing in my life now, which is logistics and transportation. But what I really did is I met a trainer. I met this girl that was a trainer and a mountain bike racer. Well, we started mountain biking. We started training. By the next thing you know, I'm 23, 24 years old. And now I'm in better shape than I ever was in my life. I was stable financially. I wasn't making serious money, but I was making enough to do what I wanted to do. And I was growing. That was the most important part. And I had a great attitude and I was focused. And then I started looking at motocross again. And I realized all my competition, I mean, literally virtually all of them, we're talking from 93, 94, they were 96, 97, almost 98. They were the guys on the main stage. And
Mm.
I got this weird like itch. And I was like, you know what? I'm going racing again, but I'm doing it on my terms.
Guys, I wanted to take a quick minute and step away from this conversation and let you guys know of a few things we got going on. So, as this recording comes out, I am actually in Africa with 21 different individuals on an experience there in South Africa. Very excited. I'm sure I'm having the time of my life. Recording this in the studio before I leave. I actually fly out today and we'll be there for a couple weeks. So excited about that. I'll let you obviously stay tuned for all the content and all the things we're going to be doing. We're launching dates for next year and just cannot wait to get out of here and go do that. So, but I also wanted to mention our community. We're building our community, Genesis. It's going to be coming out here in the next couple of weeks, hopefully right when I get back. We'll start launching that, and we're going to do a 90-day free trial, get people in there and give feedback and let them know what we're doing. So excited about those couple things. That's all we really got going on right now. We're planning for next year. We got lots of stuff in the works. We're going to be announcing dates for lots of different events. Stay tuned. Our mailing list keeps growing. People are signing up for the newsletter, so we're starting to sell out things easier, and we appreciate that. And I also want to thank our sponsors, the people who have gotten behind us, donated money for Africa, for the orphanage, Order of Man, Origin. We've got a couple others that we're very, very close to, working out. So anyway, just want to give you guys an update on where we're at. Let's get back to this conversation, and thank you for listening.
So I paid for all of it. I went and literally just asked a couple people to sponsor me that used to sponsor me. And a lot of them were very receptive 4 years, 3 years later. And they were like, yeah, okay. And I went racing, and that was 1998. And interesting enough, I raced from 98 then all the way till 2008. So a full decade, and traveled the entire world, raced for some of the biggest teams. Race for Kawasaki teams, Husqvarna factory teams, race for teams in Germany and in Europe and Greece. And, I'm always like one of those guys, and I never made it to the total pinnacle of the sport where like I could have probably retired and never did anything the rest of my life and just, look for the next exotic beach. But I made a decent living at it, and was able to raise a family through all that, or like right at the end of it, I should say. And, met my wife, and we just it was a great experience, and when I finally hung my boots up in a sense, a lot of that had to do with injury. I'm in my early 30s when that happened, and I needed shoulder surgery, and this was wrong and that was wrong, and it felt like if I was going to continue the race, then I had to overcome a massive hurdle. And I was like, wow. And when you've got all of a sudden, a family to support, that hurdle felt a little too big. So I started my motocross academy and started training riders. And for I'd say about a year and a half before there were some landowner issues, because I didn't have my own property or facility at that time, things were really well, and it was quite awesome until we had some issues with some landowners and property owners, and we had to make some big changes. And unfortunately, when that happened, my wife and I had just bought a home near where this property was. So I wasn't in a financial position to go, okay, well, we can just sell this home and pick up and go somewhere else, and we had 2 young boys, and my wife wasn't really wanting to do that either. You know what I mean? So I did what I thought was the mature thing to do at that time of my life. And I went back to logistics and transportation, and I started a courier business, as an independent contract courier, just a one man show at first, and then it grew. Um, so, but
I
yeah, I don't
wanna
know if you
touch
want to
on
add any more to that to the motocross before I go into anything else.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
I took some notes there on that, and that's an amazing story. So many people want to live that kind of life. They want
Hmm.
to follow their dreams and their passions, and they they don't. And a lot of it is financial. I like that. That's kind of one thing with me when my story a little bit, but 7.5 years ago, I quote unquote retired, right?
Yep.
And I remember my buddies talking to me saying, why are you retiring? There's more money out there to make, and I says, I've got enough. And they
Mhm.
were like, enough? What does that mean? Like they couldn't even, they're like, what is that? And I says, I should have enough to where if I'm smart, I have enough passive income to where I can never work again and I can go do what I want to do. And I like the fact that you said in there, it wasn't necessarily about the money. I see so many people get to the end of their lives, even family members that don't do what they want to do or spend more time enjoying their life and following their passions. And they get to the end and they pass away and they have millions of dollars in the bank, but they don't have millions of memories that they could have made if they would have, taken some chances so I really respect that. I respect that you went back and said, hey, let's try this again. You traveled the world. I'm sure you went to tons and tons of countries. But what I wanted to touch on with that is, you had mentioned injuries and nutrition. I recorded yesterday with two individuals here in my studio, and they're chefs. They're, you know, whatever 5-star trained chefs. I mean, just amazing. They run a couple of restaurants here in town, but they're expanding into outdoor cooking, and that's why I had them on. And one of them is like a doctorate in nutrition. And we talked a lot about that, where he said people don't understand the importance of nutrition to go hiking, to go hunting, to go ride a mountain bike. He says, that they just think I'm going to eat some food and go do it. And he says, but you got to really get down to the specifics of what's going to prevent cramps, what's going to give you the fastest calories, instantly and what's going to give you that stamina and all these different things. And he knows way more about it than I did. It was a great episode, but that's interesting that you brought that up because that's something that I don't think really people think about. They think, and even being in shape, you think, okay, I'm in pretty good shape. But I was talking to you on our phone call a couple weeks ago when I was in that one race. I got arm pump so bad that I couldn't feel my arms, and I would tell people, they're like, "Why did you slow down?" And I'm like, "I got
Right.
arm pump," and they're like, "What's that?" And I'm like, "Tell you felt that? It is deab de what deab deb debilitating? Is that the word?
Yeah.
to
Your grip.
where, yeah, your grip, you can't hold on to the handlebars. I mean, you're literally your arms are just you can't even feel them,
Right.
and they're
Yep.
and then you get done and they're throbbing and aching, and I didn't realize that, that's something you have to train for. That's something, you use
Mhm.
muscles that you didn't even know you had. I got off
Right.
the bike in the next couple days. So that's very interesting that you bring that up. I think that's very important for people to understand is, if you, and again, this comes back to injuries, where
Mhm.
if you're not ready with your diet and your physicality, that's when problems can happen. I remember
Absolutely. Yeah.
I wrecked in my second race, from arm pump. I hit a jump,
Oh,
and when I
okay.
landed, I hit a little short and I couldn't hold on.
Mhm.
And it wasn't a bad wreck, I just went down, but that being that fatigued, and I'm sure like you said with, throwing up in your helmet and that exhausted, that's when trouble can happen. That's when you can, break a
Absolutely.
leg or
Yeah.
break a wrist because you are,
Well, mentally,
you know
you're just not there anymore.
Mhm.
And you take a sport like motocross. I mean, motocross is such a unique sport. So many people don't know this in the mainstream, I believe, where not only do you have your equipment, meaning, you want your bike spot on, your suspension right, the right tires, the air pressure, the right grips, the way the handlebars are set up, everything like that, the foot pegs, brake levers, clutch levers. But then you got your body aspect of it. You obviously got to be fit, got to be hydrated. Like I'm a big one on hydration. I mean, it's so funny.
Mm.
My boys are 15 and 17, and literally my wife goes nuts. She's like, we go through water here like we're drinking out of the pond. And I'm like, that's
Mm.
good. My 15-year-old
Yep.
old, I'm like, you got to have 1 ounce per body weight. I'm like,
Yep.
I'm religious like that. You got to go
I love
after it,
that.
keep hydrated. And that's, obviously what I learned after my comeback from motocross. Then I learned, okay, wow, I need to drink right. I need to eat right. I got to plan ahead. Where before that, we didn't do any of that stuff. We just went and
Mm.
we're winging it.
Yeah.
Well, so in motocross, but then you also have the weather and the terrain. And people don't think about that. Like, hey, I'm going to go ride a
Yeah.
dirt bike track. Well, you know what? What are you going to do? You're going to go ride hard pack and you go ride sand. Is it going to be rutted? Is it going to be, all this stuff. And then on race day, is it going to be pouring down rain? Well, guess what? There's no
That
stopping the event. You know what I mean? Is it
Yeah.
going to be 40
Yeah.
degrees? Is it going to be 112?
Good
Are you
point.
prepared for that? And I mean, believe me, I would love to articulate and be like a spokesperson for motocrossing sometime, and I don't know if I can ever be that, but the diversity and the amount of, just its circumstances that get thrown into just to try to compete in that sport. And then obviously you throw in the competition and it's just like, wow, I mean, there is so much going on here, you know. And obviously, when you and I first talked, and I said, hey, maybe we could do some sort of introduction to dirt bikes, which could turn into adventure bikes or street bikes, whatever. And that's fine. Um, because I don't expect to teach new people how they want to just go compete, but we can introduce
Mhm.
them how they want to do it if they want to take that path. But you
Absolutely.
don't just decide in one day, okay, well, I'm going to go put all this together and compete next weekend. I mean,
Mhm.
don't get me wrong. You could do it, but it would be ugly.
It would.
It would be
Yeah.
ugly.
It
And,
would.
and I'll
It
tell you
would.
something. You brought up earlier about teaching a rider a street, because obviously street bike is big. There's people all over just wanting to learn to ride. I want to buy a street bike. Never rode a bike in their life. Well, I know how to ride a bike. Well, it's a little different. Yeah, there's the variables of the other cars, and you can go to these little motorcycle training. Your state provides. They may teach you more, not how to ride the bike, but about the laws. That's
Mhm.
because I've experienced them all. And don't get me wrong, that stuff is great. But the instincts of how to ride a motorcycle, you learn from a dirt. You don't
Absolutely.
take, and I hate to say this, and there's probably some street bike riders out there that are going to hate me when I say this. You don't take a decent street bike rider that never rode a dirt bike and put him on a dirt bike and he's good. But I can tell you something. You can put the most beginner dirt bike rider, he can how to go ride a dirt bike around, put him on a street bike, and he's pretty good. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? It doesn't go back
Yep.
and forth, but you learn how to ride a dirt bike and learn how the terrain controls and where your body needs to be and how your positioning is. Even sometimes down to your breathing, how you're
Yeah.
breathing when you breathe, take
Mhm.
that and transition into a street bike or an adventure bike, and you are going to be so much of a better rider and safer rider.
Oh, well, and you made a good point there too, where, what I took away from my couple races was I went into it way too early, way too, aggressive, and
Mhm.
not only are you a danger to yourself, you're a danger to others, and that was the biggest
Absolutely.
thing I took away was, I ran that guy over. Luckily he was okay. I found him after the race and I just kind of skimmed across him luckily, but uh, it's one of those things where if you go out there on
It
the road,
happens.
yeah, it does. Yeah. If you go out there on the road or the dirt and you're not prepared, you can be a liability to others. And so I think like you're saying, M42 is about trying to get people outside, trying to get them to try new things. You never know what's going to grab your attention, but do it the right way. And so I definitely want to look, and we're going to talk more about this off camera, but
Sure.
putting something together here next year to where we bring people out and there can be a 1.0 and a 2.0. 1.0 is you've never sat on a bike and 2.0 is you've sat on a bike and we can cater that. But that's what it feels like with most of these sports. Everything, you look at everything, archery. I did an archery podcast and it's like, you know, what bow do you buy? What arrows do you shoot? Like you said, you show up to a motocross track, somebody who doesn't know how to get into it just doesn't, it's so overwhelming.
It
And
is.
that's where somebody like you can come in and say, "Hey, look, this is how you start. This is how it goes.
Yeah, you provide
Safety."
that path. Right.
Yep, yep. And safety, you mentioned that to me where you want to bring them out and just start slow and make sure that they understand that, motocross can be dangerous. I had friends that I have friends that have lost their children from it, and stuff like that. So, it can be a dangerous thing, but at the same time, most of my friends who know the risks and still race and it brings them so much joy. It's like you don't want to sit on the front porch and watch life go by, but at the same time making sure they have the right equipment, they're the right bike. I remember having mine was a YZF 250, I believe. Does that sound right?
4-stroke?
No, it was a two stroke.
Oh, okay. So it
So
wasn't an F. It was just a
okay,
YZ.
YZ 250. Okay.
Mhm,
So I had a YZ 250, but before that I had a 125.
mhm.
And I had a buddy at the sand dunes who's like, dude, here, try my 450.
Right.
And I'm like, oh, okay. And
Well, you
they
sound
look the
like you're a
same.
big dude, right?
Yeah, yeah,
So, yeah.
yeah. And
Mhm.
they look the same. I'm like, they're pretty similar in size, but I got on that thing
They
and it
are.
was terrifying, to go to
Right.
that much more. And it was different,
Mhm.
because I was on a two stroke. So the four stroke doesn't have that power band and some of those things. So, but I got off it and I thought, that is too far ahead right now. I shouldn't even be on that thing. And that's what I think people need to understand is I would like to get my kids into it, but I don't know whether I buy a 50, a 60, an 80. I just don't even know.
Absolutely. How old are your children? I didn't even ask you that.
My one boy's birthday is today. He's 10. So
Oh,
when we're
wow.
done here, I'm
Awesome.
gonna go. Yeah, we're gonna go have a quick little birthday party before we head to Turkey today. As you know, we're flying out to Turkey. Um, But, yeah, 10 and 12, so the other one's almost 13. So they're at that perfect age
Oh,
where,
okay. Yeah. Yeah.
start getting them into some things, and again, I'm one of those dads where I don't pressure them to do anything,
Mhm.
but I want them to try everything,
Try everything.
and try
I'm
it
the same way.
safely. Yep, and so let them test it out, and if it scares them or they don't like it, then, hey, hop off and let's try another something else, but
Yeah.
that's where I'm hoping with this new business, M42, is we can give people this avenue to come in and try all these different experiences and not go out there and spend, 20 grand buying a bike and gear and all this stuff and then be like, oh, that wasn't what I thought.
Right. 6 months
And
later, you're like, "Okay, well, that's sitting, gathering cobwebs."
I had a buddy do that. I had a good friend of mine. He went out for Christmas and he's got some money, but he bought him a bike, his wife a bike, and his three girls a bike.
Wow.
bought a trailer. I mean, it was like, I think it was 35 or 40 grand in stuff he
I'm
bought,
sure.
and
Yeah.
he's got money, so it wasn't a big deal, but he bought it. They rode like twice, and I remember talking to him and he's like, dude, yeah. He's like, it scares me. I don't want to get injured. And
Mhm.
my girls don't like it. And my other buddy ended up buying that stuff for like 20 grand. And then
Right.
he resold it for like 30 grand.
Oh, wow, wow, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. But anyway, but I've seen that happen, and it would have been a lot cheaper for my buddy to come out to
yeah.
an experience or like your
Mhm.
academy and test that
Yeah,
out, and so
absolutely. Do you
yeah.
know, yeah, I'm just gonna mention this real quick, but
Yeah.
for anybody that really has younger kids that wants to experience something similar to motocross, I'll tell you what, getting them into BMX is another
Mm,
awesome thing
yeah.
because my 2 boys have been racing BMX since they were both 3 years old, and
Wow.
I'll be completely honest with you, and this is me just going right down to the, like you're
Yeah.
talking to a family member.
Yeah.
I always kind of dreamt of myself and our boys all racing together in motocross.
Mm,
And when we got them into BMX, that we did it heavily. We traveled all around like I did motocross. We were doing it for them with their BMX when they were 10 years old. We were going to
mm,
national events and all this. We went to the Olympic tracks and it was a great time. But a few years ago, it faded away for them. And I thought it would transcend to motocross. And don't get me wrong, they both ride, but at the moment they don't race. And they
mm,
didn't ever really show that real commitment to like, hey, I really want to do this. And because I went through spent so many years of racing and injuries and money, I was like, listen, I at least know now I'm not going to go push you and put all that money into it unless you're really committed to it. Because in a way, I just think if you're a dad out there pushing your kid, push your kid, they're just not into it. And he's out there breaking his collarbone or his wrist, every couple of months. I don't see the benefit in that. Do you know what I'm getting at?
absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
there is a lot of
100%.
that going on also, which I'm not thrilled about. But it's really strange. My 15-year-old right now has literally been riding like every single day now. And now he's
Mm,
like, Dad, I think I really want to do it now. And it's kind of
yeah.
funny because like the people he'd be racing against, most of them all started when they were like 8, or
Right.
younger. And I'm like, but
Right.
you know what? It's fine. If you want to do that, we can do it. And I actually just picked up a 450 Honda myself just maybe 2 months ago because I was
Mhm.
like, you know what? I wasn't riding there for a while. I was just kind of piddling around with my kids, but I'm like, you know what? One thing about me is I feel like my business makes me sit too much. And I started gaining weight. I'm out of shape and I'm not feeling, I'm 50 years old now and I'm not feeling the best. Um, and a lot of it's old injuries are coming back majorly to haunt me. But I'm
Mhm.
like, you know what? I got to start riding again. If anything, at least it gets me out on the track and I'm there for the afternoon in the heat and I'm going to get in better shape over that alone.
Mhm.
So I've been
Mm,
doing that. But now my son Gavin, who's 15, he's like, Dad, we got to go racing together. We got to go, so
yeah.
we'll see here what happens in the next couple months. The only problem I have, and you had mentioned this to me real quick, is you had said maybe I should come out and join you with your mountain bike adventure. And boy, don't get
Mhm.
me wrong, I would love that. But
Mhm.
I've had 3 surgeries on one of my knees, and right now it is so bad that I have lost a lot of flexibility in it. And just going out riding my dirt bike, like to hit a big jump and just the impact when I land, it's like woof, it blows up like a balloon and it's
Mm,
stiff. So
mm.
I've been going to the orthopedist now for about a year, and he's just telling me at this point, look, the arthritis has grown so much bone on the side of your knee. There's nothing else to do. I get shots of it. I get, injection shots every 3 months just to try to keep.
Mhm.
But
Mm.
so right now I'm trying to figure out a way to um, take like 2 months off of work and get away from the business, whatever I need to do to get a knee replacement.
Oh, wow.
Because
Wow.
I have friends that have knee replacements that were old motocrossers and they're like, hey, you get that and you rehab it properly, you're going to feel like you're 20 years old again. So
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm thinking maybe this December, but that's still up in the air.
Well,
Yeah.
and, I'm glad you bring that stuff up because I think, like I was telling my cousin who was a professional snowboarder, he actually was roommates with Carrie Hart
Oh
and
yeah.
TJ
Mhm.
Lavin. I don't know if you know TJ Lavin. They're really good friends.
Yep. I don't,
He
but
was
I know
the
Carrie. Yeah.
yeah, TJ was a freestyle bike rider, bicycle.
Okay.
He hosts the Real World on MTV right now. Anyway,
Oh wow.
they grew up together, and I was telling him, that you were coming on this Friday, and he said he rides dirt bikes. His kids have dirt bikes now,
Right. Hmm.
and he says, I think that's important for people to know because whenever somebody hears, dirt bikes or motocross, they think injury,
Right.
and it does happen. It does happen, but you can also do this sport. I rode for, 7 or 8 years, really hard. I broke my collarbone once at the
Mhm.
sand dunes. Just came over and it dropped out from under me. Was kind of one of those deals where I just hit the handlebars, but no bad injuries. Nothing, never
Right.
broke
Hmm.
anything other than that. And I think that's what people need to realize is, yeah, you can get injured. You absolutely
Hmm.
can. But most of the people that I know that go out there and do it, with their kids or their wife or for the exercise, it's a very good sport that doesn't have to be, you know, doesn't have to
Injury
beat you up.
prone.
You can go
Yeah.
ride trails. You don't have to go to the
Right.
track and do
I
jumps, or you can
believe
go to the
most injuries come from two things. One is you're really trying to compete at the high level. So you're
Mhm.
always pushing. You know what I mean? You're
Yep.
always trying to go that
Yep.
next level.
Yep.
Or a guy that's not prepared at all, like you were in your race and you're and you're willing to send it.
Exactly.
Even if you go
Exactly.
out in the trails and your buddies are trying to like, I don't know, do some sort of weird rock climb or something. And a
Mhm.
guy that
Yeah.
is his skill level's not there and he's like, well, I'm just gonna send it. Well, you know what I
Yep.
mean? Then you're
Yeah.
not using your head. But you could go
Exactly.
ride all day long, have a great time, get in great shape, everything else, and probably fall over once or twice, but maybe going 2 mile an hour. And it's no big deal.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
Yep.
Yep, and
Absolutely.
that's what I think people should know is, I told my wife, I says, "I want my boys to do this." I enjoyed it. It was a big part of my life for 5 or 6 years.
Right.
And she's just like, "Oh, no, they're gonna die." And I'm like, "No, they're not gonna
They're
die."
gonna die. Oh
That's,
my goodness.
yeah. I'm like, "No, that's not how this works." That's,
Right.
some unfortunate incidences that, whatever, whatever. But statistically, we can go out there, we can ride in the hills, we can ride on a little dirt track. And I'm gonna
Yeah.
explain to them that, don't ever hit a jump, that you don't feel comfortable hitting.
Mhm.
Like you said, it's a lot ego, it's being that young bravado, that you think you're invincible, and I'm there to coach them to say, I actually did a podcast of it actually came out, I think, a couple weeks ago with Kip Sorensen, and we were
Mm.
talking about jujitsu. Um,
Yeah.
and I says, I'd like to get into that, but I'm embarrassed because I don't want to walk into the gym. And he says, Rick, us black belts respect that more than anything to see somebody come out here and start, and so I want to teach my kids that really changed the way I look at the world, that just one sentence, because, I want to let them know, like, look, anything you do in life, if you're playing football, soccer, motocross, you have to start. And all those people ahead of you that are pros and that are, amazing had to start just like you. And so, one, don't be afraid to start. And two, don't get caught up in peer pressure and all that, expectations from peers and parents or whatever to do things you're not comfortable with. I really hope they listen to that.
Or get caught up and people are watching me.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. You get
So
in
I
front of a
hear a lot
crowd
of
and you're a
that.
different person.
That's
Yep.
right. Yeah.
Well, man, I wanted to touch a little bit on, we covered most of my talking points here.
Okay.
The adventure bikes, I want to look into more of that. That
Mhm.
I call those enduros. Those are not the
Well,
same, you said, right?
yeah, there is enduro bikes, which are usually on the smaller scale. Because so
Okay.
really, an adventure bike is just an enduro
Is that
bike,
like the
or it was
BMWs, like the BMWs with the saddlebags and stuff? Is
BMWs,
that?
the Triumph Tigers,
Okay.
Honda, Africa, KTM makes one actually called the Adventure,
Okay.
and
And it's
so really,
dirt and asphalt,
it
right? It's
is.
kind of
It's basically an enduro bike, but a lot of them have technology and bigger engines. So, I mean,
Okay.
but don't get me wrong, you can get an adventure bike as small as a 250, but a lot of
Okay.
guys will go the 600, 700s, and all the way to 1200.
Oh,
Like
wow.
KTM has a 1200. I believe the Honda Africa is 1,000, if I'm not mistaken. But I have to look into that bike more, a little bit more. But the KTM is a nice bike. The Trap Tiger, phenomenal bike. But those bikes, interesting enough, guys are doing everything the enduro guys are doing. I've even seen guys doing some motocross stuff, like on a small scale. Don't get me wrong. They're
Hmm.
not out racing motocross, but they went on a track. Um, and then these are bikes that you can race the car across the desert,
Mm.
the
Hmm.
Baja, you're familiar with
Hmm.
stuff like that. People that want to ride these things across the world, you know,
Yeah. Yeah.
and I mean, getting into the little bit of the fantasy dream world of my life, I dream about riding not only across the country, but maybe around the world on an adventure bike with my boys. Now,
Mm.
can I ever
I love
make
it.
that happen? I think
Yeah.
that would be just the most amazing experience ever. I mean, don't get me wrong. I'd love to do it with my wife, but my wife,
Right.
she doesn't know how to ride well. And we've tried
Hmm.
to teach her on little pit bikes and she's scared to death of it. And the
Yeah.
thing is if
Yeah.
I'm going to ride around the world in adventures, she's not riding on the back with me.
Yeah.
You
For
know what I
sure.
mean?
For sure.
Because I
Yeah.
don't want to
Yeah.
just go down the road.
Yeah.
If I drive by a power line, it looks like we can go. I'm hammering that way,
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Well, and she can,
but
she can follow along in a pilot car and meet you at the next stop, and
that's right. Yep.
it's, you can find ways around
Yeah.
that for sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
I
So
love that, man.
that's,
I think let's look into that. That intrigues me as well. I think let's look at that as far as something, maybe
mhm,
an experience we do where, we bring people out and introduce them to it, and then the next step is let's go on a, three, four
let's
hundred
go on a ride.
thousand
Yeah.
thousand mile ride and see
Yeah.
some country and I
Right. Cause I mean, you said that you rode to like Sturgis and stuff on a street bike. I mean,
Mhm.
that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Um, when I think about riding on a chopper or something, I think to me, it sounds exhausting because of the
Oh,
way
it
you're
was.
sitting and stuff.
Oh, it
Yeah.
was
Yeah.
horrible. So
Right.
I had a big dog chopper, that
Hmm.
was like 9 or 10 feet long, and we rode that thing to Yellowstone a couple times we were 25, 26, so it wasn't as big of a deal, but,
Right.
I ended up losing that in the recession, that story where I lost everything, it ended up getting repossessed. Couldn't
Oh,
afford it.
okay.
It was a $370
Right.
payment on a motorcycle,
Right.
and
Right. Yeah.
just dumb, but now I'm a member of, I can't remember the name of it, but it's a membership. So it's $35 a month, and I pay it
Okay.
now, and they're all Eagle Rider. Eagle Rider is the name of the business. So it's called Eagle
Oh, wow.
Rider. I pay $35 a month, and every month I get a credit for 1 hour on any street bike, and they have, I don't know, I don't want to say hundreds of locations, but they're in Hawaii, I've rented them from Hawaii, Vegas several times, Salt Lake several times, Florida. So you fly out.
Mhm.
I did it in Dallas, or no, Austin. So we fly out there. It's $35 a month, and now I have 30 or 40 credits,
Oh, wow.
and I think a credit actually might be. I think it's a day. One credit is 1 day. I'm pretty sure.
Mm,
Anyway, we flew out to Austin. I have, I go over there. They have 30 bikes to choose from,
wow.
like you're saying. Most of the ones I rent now are the big, Harley Davidson cruisers that got the saddlebags
Right.
and the cruise control,
Yeah. Yeah.
but we rent a motorcycle
Reverse.
and reverse.
Is
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
reverse?
Yeah. Yep. So
Funny.
we rent
Mhm.
those, and it works out well because, and that's what I tell people, if you don't have money, you don't need to go buy the $30,000 chopper and get a payment. There's these membership programs and renting them, go rent a bike for $200 a day.
I wasn't
The
even aware of
chances of,
that, like a membership. Yeah. It's
yeah,
interesting.
it's called Eagle Rider. Check it out. It's amazing.
Huh.
And it's, like I said, 35, $40 a month. I'm pretty sure a credit is a day. And their bikes are like $150 to $200 a day. So you're getting it for $35, but it's perpetual.
Sure.
And I've rented from them 8 or 10 times. We show up, it's a brand new bike. I usually take my helmets and stuff, my gear, because I still have that. So we'll fly with
Right.
that
Mm,
because it fits us. And then they rent it as well. We hop on it. We ride in Austin. We had it for 3 days. We rode all around Austin, went out. on the outskirts, went to barbecue joints, just had a great time. And then you go drop it off and you walk away. You know, you don't have to store it. You don't have to pay insurance. And then also
Yeah.
you get to ride 20, 30 different styles of bikes. I mean, they have trikes, they have bullet bikes. I'm sure they have adventure. I didn't look into that, but
Yeah.
anyway, I love
That's amazing. Yeah.
I really enjoy being out there on the road. My dad always says, "I don't understand, you know, you're out there and the wind's beating you and you're getting sunburnt." And I'm like, "If you
Yeah.
don't get it, you don't get it." I'm not going to try to explain it, but for me, it is just therapy, you know,
Well,
and my
here's what I was
wife
going to
loves
tell
it.
you. Right. I believe my wife would also riding with me with a
Yeah.
chopper or something, you know.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
haven't really
Yeah.
ventured into that world a whole lot because I
Mhm.
always said that we'll do that when we get old, which I don't know
Yeah.
when old stands for.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
But
yeah, yeah,
like to go ride, let's say across the country or across the world, whatever, on an adventure bike, you're probably familiar with that Onyx maps.
yeah,
Um,
mhm,
yeah.
yeah,
So to me, that's exciting. The
yeah,
terrain never change or it always
yeah,
changes, you know, and it's like,
yes,
okay, we're going from, let's say, Pennsylvania, where I'm at, and we're going to Washington State, but we're not
yep,
going on Interstate 80 and this interstate. We're going on
yep,
whatever this app shows a dirt road over here. To me,
that's
that's like,
awesome.
wow, that's really
That's
cool,
a
you
whole
know?
'nother level. That's yeah, I remember
Yeah.
a couple times hitting dirt, like, in Yellowstone or on some of my rides where there's a couple miles of road construction and you're on this big old
Mhm.
bike, you know, big old Harley, and I'm like, "This is" it's just a little nerve-wracking, you know, because you don't wanna
That
slide
it
out.
is. Right.
And so, yeah, to be able to go on that terrain on and off, asphalt and dirt, and take these little side roads, you know, I ran, you know, my Airbnb here in Utah,
Mhm.
and, we had some people check in last night, and I noticed that they, uh, were walking up my driveway, which my driveway is about a mile long, but the last half a mile's you have to have four-wheel drive or all-wheel drive.
Oh,
And
okay.
they thought their rental car had it, and they didn't, and so my property manager checks them in, and I called him and I says, "Hey, what's going on? I just saw these four young girls, you know, walking up the road," and he says, "Oh, they don't have all-wheel drive," and they said they'll just walk up, and I says, "Are they okay?" You know, that's hasn't happened before in the couple years we're renting it. Most people bring their all-wheel drive, and he says, "No, they're just, like, loving it." They're saying, "What our adventure already started." You know, we're
Right,
already
right.
you
Kinda
know,
walk
and,
with the highway, it's
yeah,
amazing.
yeah, and they get
It's
up to the you
awesome.
know, you'll have to come check it out sometime, but they that's what I kinda look at is you can look at it as a negative, or you can say, "Wow, this is just part of the adventure," and to have those, you know, traveling around the world for 7.5 years, there's a couple times where I remember in Australia, we got on a dirt road for, like, 30 or 40 miles, and, you know, I'm looking at MapQuest, and I'm like, "This says we're right," and my kids are getting nervous, my wife's getting nervous. You know, we're out on this old dirt road in the outback of Australia, and, there's monitor lizards running across the road. I was chasing them, trying to catch them. Whole 'nother story, but, um, you know, and my now we look back and my wife says, "Oh, man, we went to Australia. It was amazing. We road tripped it for a year, and Rick took us on these roads that were dirt, and we're out in the boonies, and we didn't know if we were gonna die or not," you know? That's where you start getting outside your comfort zone, you know? You get off the highway and you get into some little mountain road through the hills of, you know, Kentucky or something, and it's like, that's when you're living, you know, and so I love that. That's a good I'm gonna try that. I'm gonna do that next. I'm
I
gonna put that on my
I
bucket
look
list.
for that. Getting
I
out of the
love that.
comfort zone, that's what
Yep.
I'm looking for. And it's
I love
funny,
that.
like my boys, you know, they're 17 and 15.
Mhm.
And my 17-year-old, you know, obviously he's really trying to find himself right now. And kids
Mhm.
are always pressuring him, what are you gonna do and everything. And
Mhm.
I'm kind of like you're thinking. I'm like, okay, well, you don't need to know what you're gonna do, but let's experience everything.
For
But
sure.
sometimes it's hard for me to get him motivated to really try to experience everything.
Oh, for sure. For sure.
But I'll tell you one thing, I'm definitely in our family of 4 at the moment, I'm probably the oddball because my wife, she doesn't like to get out of that comfort zone. But I
Yeah.
push her into it a lot, you know, and
Yeah.
she
Mhm.
she definitely is like, "Ooh, okay, you're going a little further and I'm comfortable with." But I'll tell you
Yeah.
one thing, I tell her stories of when I was traveling as a racer. You know, like I remember flying into Germany one time. You know, I don't speak German. I got my race bag and some reason the flight was like 2 in the morning and I had to get like an hour away. You know, well, I don't know. I'm trying to figure out how do I take this little train over there? And I jump on this train in the middle of the night, and the race owner was willing to go to this one little town. It was called Roth, which it was Roth in Germany.
Mm.
And he said, I'll pick you up there. Okay. Well, this is before cell phones. Like it was probably right around the
Yeah.
time. I don't have a cell phone. I got like
Yeah.
a card that I can use at like one of the phone booths, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I go up there and I'd never been on one of those trains before. So I'm going and going and I'm trying to read how it works and everything. And I'm going, what the heck is all this? And all of a sudden, there was like 4 different changes. And all of a sudden, one of them, it doesn't have a number or like a track number or anything. It has a word in German. Well, I'm getting a little nervous. I'm like, what's this? So finally, this dude in front of me, I'm like, hey, excuse me, you speak any English? He turns around, oh, about it. You know, he spoke a little bit. I said,
Mhm.
yeah, I'm trying to say, what is this? And here he goes, oh, that stands for it's a walk. I had to like
Mm.
get off the train and walk
Yeah.
like 10
Yeah.
minutes there. I didn't know what it
Yeah.
meant. So I'm
Yeah.
well in the middle of the night. So I walk and I get on I get on the last train and I can see that it says I'm going to be en route in like 25 minutes or whatever. Okay. So the train stopped at every station on the way there. I could see it out the window, but it just seemed like it stopped. Like literally, it felt like 10 seconds and left. So
Yeah.
I'm like, do
Yeah.
they know I'm
They're
on this
quick.
train? Because nobody else is there.
Yeah.
So I'm coming. Okay, I'm ready to go. Right, the next one's
Mhm.
coming, and I didn't know if I was supposed to go to the front of the train. I didn't know anything. Well, you won't believe it.
Yeah.
We get there, the train stops and then goes, and I'm like, so I like kind of panic for a minute, and I like grab my bag and I'm walking to the front of the train. I'm like, I got to find someone because nobody was on the train. It was the middle of the night in
Mm.
like small town Germany. I
Yeah.
found some guy. He looked at me. He knew right away. He's like, oh, you missed your stop. So you won't
Yeah.
believe this.
Yeah.
He rips a ticket. He rips a ticket and he starts writing in German on the ticket. And he's writing, um, he wants me to give this ticket at the next stop and get it to the train going the other way and give it to the
Yeah.
guy, telling him
Yeah.
what I got to do. Oh my goodness.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I
Instructions.
do that. And I'm like, I hope this guy is like half cool. And he's like, oh, okay,
Mm.
this dude needs to get off at this stop. Because
Yeah.
it was worded differently or well, it
Yeah.
all worked out, but it was funny. I was supposed to be there. Let's say it was like 1:15 in the morning and the team owner went there. Well, I didn't get there till like 2:30
Yeah.
and he
Yeah.
actually drove home and then came back. It was like, I felt
Yeah.
terrible,
Yeah.
but it was a funny
Yeah.
experience. Like things like that. I have several of those, you know, we all do when we travel. And
Mhm.
my wife goes, oh, I couldn't been there. I might have had a panic attack,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
and I'm like, well,
And
you
I
roll with it, you know?
You do. You do. So like I told you, me and my family of 5, and my wife's pregnant. We are heading to Turkey this afternoon. Turkey, we
Wait,
go
your
to
wife's pregnant
Turkey.
now?
Yeah, yep, yep.
Oh,
She's
wow,
4 months.
congratulations, I
Yeah.
didn't know that.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, yep,
Okay.
yep. Thanks, brother. Yeah, so
Yeah,
she's pregnant. The baby's due in January.
okay.
And so we head to Turkey and then we go to Africa and it's about a 3-week trip total. I have not even we have not, my wife, me, have not even started packing. And we leave in, like 6 hours. And people don't understand that. And that's the truth. I haven't started packing, but I've done it enough and I've gone through these situations to where, we all pack in a backpack. We don't take checked luggage. We traveled for a year at a time in backpacks. You don't need to bring all this gear and all this crap that you got to drag around. They have stores in Turkey, they have stores in Africa. It's like, we'll be fine. But like you said, I think us talking about this and having these conversations, hopefully people will listen in and realize that it's not scary. And those are the moments that I remember, the problem, sleeping in my car. Those are
Right.
when we tell people we traveled for a year, we bring up the flat tire or getting lost or sleeping in our car. Those are the moments that stand out and make that an adventure. And so if you can rewire your brain into, you're going to be fine. You're going to be fine. You may have to sleep in your car. You may miss the stop on the train, but it's gonna work out. And to not panic and to just go with the flow and just, people try to go and control. I actually did. The first couple months of my travel, I planned out, the first 6 months of my travel, I planned out before I even flew. out of the country, and it was my first trip. We flew to Normandy. That was my bucket list. The top thing was Normandy. I just, soldiers and vets are my, yeah, they're my heroes. And so I planned out, we're going to Normandy, we're renting a car, and we're gonna road trip the Europe for 6 months. And I had it every stop planned out. It was exhausting. It took me almost a year and a half to plan. And then what I learned is you miss things. We'd go to this town that I just Googled, and some lady would say, "Why did you come here? You should have went over there. That's amazing."
That's right.
And so now I plan out about a week ahead because I do have small children and a pregnant wife, but you can adjust. There's always an Airbnb, there's always a hotel, there's always a grocery store. And, I think that's like what you said with all your travels and everything you've done in your life. It's just part of the adventure, and that's what I live for, those uncomfortable moments, as long as they're not dangerous, putting
Right.
my family in danger, then, let's go. Let's have an adventure. So I we're running long here, man. I love it. I could talk to you
Yeah.
forever. I know that. You're so easy to talk to. I appreciate you reaching out to me. Like I said, you came to M42, you reached out to me on the chat, told me your story, and that's what this is about for me, is finding people that are like-minded and just cool people. You're a good dad. I wanted to get more into your entrepreneurial, stuff because that's an adventure in itself, as you know.
It is.
That's very stressful and very so I respect that you're doing that and you're hustling for your family. Maybe we'll have you on again down the road and we'll talk about an event that we're planning and get a little more detailed into that. But I sincerely appreciate you coming on, Damien. You're, an amazing individual just from the little insight that I have into your life. I hope we can meet in person someday, either on a bike or bring your family out to Utah. I'd love to host you. But is there anything you want to add to this conversation before we wrap up and let people go?
Well, I think we covered a lot. Obviously, we didn't get into, any of the business or entrepreneur stuff, but that's fine. Something you were saying about putting your family in danger, I will say what I've experienced for some, and I don't know why this is, but the American community seems more fearful of travel because they feel there's danger. I felt more than people I met around the world. I never knew why that was. I remember meeting backpackers, or not backpackers, but they wanted to be backpackers, then they became backers. And it was a group of girls in the Czech Republic, and they all wanted to go backpack all the way through Mexico. And what's interesting, you talk to, let's say, my wife or a lot of just American women, and they're like, I'm not going backpacking in Mexico. So
Absolutely.
if anything, I hope that your audience, one, I hope it really grows and that uh, we can help bring value to people that really do want to venture, but that they also know that, yes, there are dangers out there, but it's probably not as mainstream scale as some people think about it. Like, I wonder if our 24-hour news cycle maybe freaks people out more than it should, So, um, I just
Yeah, I
hope
think
people
I
out
think
there.
I think 100%.
Right.
I think you're absolutely right. A lot of foreign countries, especially Europe, they have what's called I think it's a gap year or I think that's the term, but after high school, before college, most of them go travel for a year. And I think that that's the big thing here is people in America, they stay in America. They road trip, they go, in RVs and stuff, which is great, not belittling that, but one of the things that people are most shocked about with me is, like I said, we traveled for almost 8 years now. We've been to 60 plus countries. I've never ran into a bad person. I really haven't, I mean, maybe downtown Paris, in a city, the big cities, you can run into some assholes, that are going to flip you off or cutting them off or something. But I try not to stay in those cities. I try to stay on the outskirts of any kind of big city because I like the villages. I like the small town vibe. But, you always hear the French are assholes, right? It's a stereotype. And from what I saw from the few months we spent road tripping all of France. I mean, we road tripped it for 90 days. Never met a person that wasn't willing to help. Germany, like you said, that gentleman on the train in the middle of the night, I remember Italian women squeezing my kids' cheeks everywhere we went. They just would squeeze their cheeks, and we let them, we let them. And I think if you go there and you go there grateful and with an open mind and with a smile, it's going to be returned in everything I've seen. Obviously, there's some bad sales and some bad people, but we never encountered them. I've never felt in danger in thousands of nights outside of our country. And so, yeah, I think that's a good point to bring up to tell people, listen, I don't watch the news. I will read through it online. Just I'll go through the headlines real quick just to kind of stay up to date, but I do not turn on the TV. Haven't for 5 or 6 years. Because it is depressing, most of it. They're trying to, that's a whole nother topic, but yeah, man, just go out there, spend time with your family, get outside, whether it's motocross or, you know, throwing a football, whatever. Just get outside, engage with your family. Like you said, set the screens down. Being in the same room as somebody and you're both on screens does not count.
Right.
You're not engaging with you got to wrestle with them. You got to throw the football. You got to jump on the trampoline. You got to ride bikes with them. And so I just want to say thank you for reaching out to me. I appreciate,
Absolutely.
your friendship. I appreciate you talk. I know you told me, you're telling everybody about M42. That means a lot to me. So I just want you to know that I love knowing that there's people like you out there in the world. It makes me feel better about humanity. And I hope we can get together down the road, man. And I really appreciate your time.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for your time. I thank for the invite on here. It's been just an amazing experience so far meeting you, hearing your
Yeah,
story. And thanks for the opportunity. I love the platform. And honestly, I hope to be part of it more. And let's grow this audience and get people out having a great time and telling more of their stories.
let's do it. Let's
Absolutely.
do it, brother.
All
How
righty.
can people find you? It's Instagram, right? Damien
Yeah, I mean,
Plotts
I'm
or
on
what?
Instagram as Plots MX,
Oh,
and I
Plotts
used to
MS.
use
Okay.
it. Yeah, Plots MX was my
Okay.
Instagram, and I'm on Facebook, just Damien Plots, and I do still have my Damien Plots Motocross Academy Facebook.
Right.
But I'll be honest with you, since I did start my business several years ago, I have
Hmm.
dabbled on that. Every once in a
Right.
while, something goes on there, but not too much. But you
Right.
never know because I will say, like I said in this podcast, the bug is back. There might be a lot more coming. So
Well, and I love it, man. Like I said, I hope that we're involved with that. I'm gonna try, to make that happen on my end, and who knows where it'll go. But I love this world. I love motocross. I love street bikes. It's something I've been passionate about, and it's been part of my life for half of my life. And so, uh, I'm gonna try to push that through you, just on my end. So
sure,
anyway, all right, brother. Well,
let's
appreciate
do
your
it.
time. Have a good weekend, man, and I'll hit you up in a few weeks when I get back from my trip. So there you have it. My conversation with Damien Plotts. Absolute stud of a guy. You know, when I was getting ready to record this, a lot of the times I think, how am I going to talk for an hour about dirt bikes or for an hour about horses or for an hour about, fishing, something like that. It is a little intimidating where I'm new to podcasting and don't have a lot of knowledge in these areas. But as you can tell, talking to somebody like Damien, who has a passion for it, he's obviously a, you know, what do you say, just an expert in that field, professional dirt bike rider, or yeah, motocross rider for over a decade, went into mountain bikes, traveled the world. Now he's an entrepreneur. We didn't get into that like I was hoping, but I'm probably going to have him on again in 3 to 6 months. Just a good person and has lived a life of adventure, and we're hoping to do some experiences with him. I'm really going to push for that, either dirt bikes or the adventure bikes that we talked about. But I want to tell Damien, thank you for coming on. Thank you for reaching out and contacting me. I'm one of those guys where I'm approachable. I want to talk to cool people, and that's what this business is about for me, is meeting amazing people that have done amazing things in their lives, learning from them, building friendships, and that's what happened there. He sent me a message on the chat on our website. I responded, said, "Hey man, what's up? Who are you? What's going on? What's your thing?" He told me. I got on Instagram, looked him up, Facebook stalked him a little bit, and was like, "Dude, this is the real deal." And we ended up talking, and I could just tell that he was a like-minded person. similar values. And I wanted him on here to help you guys hopefully get into, the two-wheel experiences. Like he said, BMX, mountain biking, road bikes, dirt bikes. So follow Damien on his social media. Like I said, he had the academy, does the lessons, and we're going to try to get him out here for an experience. So keep continuing to like, follow, share, sign up for our newsletter. We're going to be announcing a lot of experiences over the next 90 days. Our community, Genesis, is going to be getting announced here. And that's what this is about, getting people outside, getting people connected, and building these relationships, which enriches my life. Knowing Damien makes my life better. And that's what this is about. So appreciate you, Damien, for coming on. Thank you for listening. Like, share, follow, all those great things. And we'll catch you on the next one. Bye.